What if I told you that the most profound and resilient people you will ever meet are not those who had easy lives, but those who have been completely shattered by them? Within the next minutes, we will explore a psychological truth so powerful, it reframes trauma not as a life sentence, but as a brutal, unasked-for curriculum for developing a depth of character that is almost superhuman. Someone who has been through too much finally sits down. It doesn't matter where, on a park bench long after sunset, in the driver's seat of a car parked in an empty garage, or simply on the edge of their own bed, staring at a wall that holds no answers. The day is over, the world is quiet, and that's when the feeling arrives. It's not a dramatic breakdown, not a scream into a pillow. It's something far more profound. It's the silent internal collapse of a structure that was never designed to hold the weight it has been carrying. It's the moment the heart, not the mind, whispers a single undeniable truth. I cannot hold all of this at the same time. If you have ever lived through a moment like that, you know the sound of that whisper. It doesn't echo, it simply settles like dust in an abandoned room. And the strangest part is, you rarely realize you've become that person, the person who has gone through too much until life forces you to sit down in that perfect, crushing silence. People will look at you and see an impossible calm. They'll comment on it. How are you so steady? Nothing seems to faze you. And you won't know how to explain that it isn't steadiness. It isn't peace. It is the profound quiet that descends when your emotional spectrum has been stretched so far, so many times, that it has lost its elasticity. It's the numbness of a nerve that has been struck one too many times. What most people call resilience isn't a virtue for you. It's a reflex, a biological and psychological imperative you developed because the alternative was to cease functioning. Because of this, you carry a psychology that others can sense but cannot name. There is a gravity to you, a depth behind your eyes that feels ancient. You listen with a softness that makes people feel heard, and you pause before you speak, weighing your words not for deception, but because you know the weight that words can carry. This creates a painful paradox. You often appear wise, mature, and grounded. You seem like the one who has it all together. But if someone could open the door to your internal world, even for a second, they would see that this maturity wasn't earned through gentle lessons. It was forged in fire. It was not developed, but extracted. Not chosen, but required. While some people grow because they are nurtured and supported, you grew because life refused to give you the version of youth or innocence that everyone else seems to have taken for granted. When you are forced to carry more emotional weight than your spirit was ever meant to hold, your entire mind begins to reorganize itself. Psychologists have a term for part of this: emotional overcompensation. Your nervous system, having been overwhelmed too many times, doesn't just recover, it rewires. It builds fortresses and early warning systems you never consciously asked for. It adapts through hypervigilance, a constant low-grade scanning of your environment for threats. It adapts through emotional bracing, perpetually preparing for an impact that may or may not come.
If you've ever wondered why you overthink every single interaction, why you can sense a shift in someone's tone from a single word, why you feel a primal need to prepare for disasters that never happen, this is why. Your mind learned on a cellular level that uncertainty was dangerous. So it built a complex system of defenses to eliminate as much uncertainty as possible. And even if you heal, even if your life becomes calm and safe, the ghost of that architecture remains, like the foundations of an old castle buried beneath a modern city. You carry an invisible curriculum, written in the ink of your pain. You know how to read silence. You can tell the difference between a comfortable silence and a dangerous one. You know how to sense tension in a room before it has even manifested, stepping around potential conflict, like a person navigating a floor littered with broken glass. You know what it's like to calm another person's trembling hands while your own heart is shaking inside your chest. You know how to make yourself small and quiet in moments when attention feels like a threat. You recover from disappointment with a speed that seems inhuman, not because you don't feel it, but because life never gave you the luxury of falling apart. These are not personality traits. They are survival traits. They are psychological autopilot scripts wired into the very fabric of your nervous system through sheer, desperate repetition. This often starts terrifyingly early. Research in developmental psychology, such as the seminal Adverse Childhood Experiences study, shows a direct, dose-responsive relationship between childhood trauma and a heightened stress response system. When a young brain experiences prolonged periods of stress, fear, or emotional neglect, it physically recalibrates. The amygdala, your brain's threat alarm, becomes hyperactive. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thought and emotional regulation, can be impaired. Your brain becomes a finely tuned instrument for detecting patterns of danger, a skill others might call intuition, but for you, it is simply pattern recognition born of necessity. It is the haunting knowledge of what comes next, learned from a lifetime of studying the preludes to pain. There is a famous and heartbreaking psychological case study known as the still face experiment. In it, a mother is instructed to play normally with her infant, who is happily engaged. Then the mother turns away and turns back with a completely still, emotionless face. Within seconds, the baby becomes distressed, trying everything in his power to re-engage the mother. When it fails, the baby ultimately turns away, collapsing into a state of despair and hopelessness. This is a primal blueprint. For someone who has gone through too much, this still face wasn't a brief experiment, it was a recurring reality. You learn that your emotional needs could not reliably elicit a response, and so you learned, eventually, to stop expressing them. You learned to self-soothe, self-analyze, and self-correct, not out of preference, but out of stark necessity. The outside world sees someone incredibly capable and composed. The inner world knows a person who is tired, deeply sensitive, and quietly, perpetually overwhelmed. This duality shapes everything. You become a collection of beautiful, painful contradictions. You can be open, yet guarded, caring, yet detached, present, yet a million miles away in your own mind. You are hopeful, yet you approach that hope with the caution of a bomb disposal expert. People who have gone through too much don't avoid vulnerability because they dislike intimacy. They avoid it because vulnerability has, throughout their lives, been a transaction that cost them dearly. It led to disappointment, to misunderstanding, to being a burden, to having their heart handed back to them in pieces. So you learned that vulnerability is not a shared experience, it is a calculated risk. And so you open up in layers, like peeling an onion, not to manipulate, but to preserve a self that has taken so long to rebuild. But here is the truth that you must hear, a truth that resonates through the halls of modern psychology. Nothing about this is broken. Your reactions are not flaws, they are logical, intelligent responses to an illogical and often painful world. Your caution makes sense. Your depth makes sense. Your need for control in a world that felt out of control makes perfect sense. Psychological adaptation is not a sign of weakness. It is the brilliant, desperate strategy of a mind fighting to survive itself. The mind is a storyteller, and when your life has been a series of difficult, chaotic chapters, your internal narrative becomes rich, complex, and layered with meanings that others simply cannot see.
And yet, within this struggle, there is something breathtakingly beautiful beginning to emerge. It is the birth of a profound empathy. There's a tenderness in people who have been broken, a gentleness that comes not from never having been hurt, but from knowing the precise texture and taste of pain. This tenderness is often mistaken for weakness, but you know the truth. Softness is not the privilege of an easy life. It is the hard-won trophy of a difficult one. A life that has taught you empathy, not through theory, but through brutal, immersive experience. A life that has shown you firsthand that everyone is carrying a weight they are not talking about. This empathy creates its own strange irony. You become the person who comforts others so naturally, so instinctively, that people don't realize you've never truly been comforted yourself. You understand others because you were forced to understand the labyrinth of your own emotions in a way most people never have to. You know how to give warmth because you have lived through winters that chilled you to the bone. You know how to hold space for someone because you can vividly remember what it felt like when there was no one to hold that space for you. But behind this immense capacity for empathy lies something else, something darker and heavier, a deep, abiding exhaustion. It is not the kind of exhaustion that a good night's sleep can fix. It is the quiet exhaustion of a soul that has been strong for too long. It is the exhaustion that doesn't make you rest, it makes you retreat. You become someone who can carry everyone else's world, but struggles to carry your own. You become a master at giving clarity to others while living in a perpetual state of internal questioning. This isn't because you don't trust people, it's because your nervous system learned in its most formative years that relying on someone else was an unpredictable gamble. And unpredictability, for someone who has gone through too much, feels like the first tremors of an earthquake. This is the foundation of the psychology of the overloaded soul. It is a world of silent collapses, rewired brains, survival reflexes disguised as personality, and an empathy born of immense pain. But this is only the beginning. This is only the wound. What comes next? How this psychology manifests in your relationships, your self-perception, and the incredible, almost alchemical process of turning this pain into your greatest power is where the true transformation begins. Now we will delve into the haunting reality of the echo, where past pain hijacks your present, and how your deepest triggers can be mapped and understood, not as enemies, but as guides to the parts of you that are still waiting to be healed. We will explore how to stop being a prisoner of your past and start becoming the architect of a future built not on survival, but on meaning. The journey into the darkest parts of your mind is about to reveal its light.
This profound exhaustion shapes a unique and often misunderstood relationship with love and connection. You don't love recklessly. Your love is not a spark. It is a slow, steady burn that requires time and immense trust to ignite. But once it does, it burns with a fierce, unwavering loyalty that feels rare in this world. You notice the small things, the slight change in the rhythm of their breathing that signals anxiety, the specific way they hold a coffee cup when they're lost in thought, the unspoken plea behind a simple, "I'm okay." You love with a deep observational sincerity, showing up in ways that are so nuanced they are often overlooked. You become the keeper of their quietest parts. But this profound capacity for love comes with a terrifying vulnerability. You are not easily wounded by overt cruelty. You've built fortresses against that. The arrows that find their way through are those of carelessness and inconsistency. A forgotten promise, a dismissive tone, a moment of being taken for granted, these are not minor slights to you. They are echoes. They are the faint but unmistakable sound of a door slamming shut from a past you thought you had escaped. Your body responds to these patterns even when your rational mind knows the present situation is different. A psychologist would call this an emotional trigger, a conditioned response where a current event activates the unresolved emotional memory of a past wound. It's not that you're overreacting to the present, you are having a completely rational, albeit devastating reaction to the past that is being vividly relived in your nervous system. Imagine a person who, as a child, was constantly interrupted and made to feel their voice didn't matter. As an adult, when their partner merely glances at their phone during a story, a tidal wave of insignificance crashes over them. It's not about the phone, it's the echo of 1,000 times their existence was silently negated. This is the cruel mechanics of the triggered mind. The past doesn't just inform the present, it invades it. Instead of explaining this complex internal archaeology, you will most often retreat. You will hide the trigger, mask the surge of anxiety, smile through the discomfort. You will prioritize harmony even when your own heart is in turmoil, because the fear of being labeled too sensitive, too needy, or too broken is a fear greater than the pain of swallowing your own distress. You have learned through brutal experience that your storms are too complex for fair weather companions, and so you learn to reign quietly on the inside. This leads to one of the greatest ironies of this psychology. You, the person quietly drowning in these internal echoes, often become the emotional anchor for everyone else. You are the person friends call at 2 a.m. with their deepest fears and most raw confessions, and you hold them. You listen without judgment, you offer perspective born of your own survival. You provide a calm harbor in their chaos. You do this because you understand pain in a language they are only just learning to speak. This has forced you to become emotionally literate long before you were ready, and this literacy gives you an almost supernatural perception. You can see through the masks people wear. You can feel the tension in a room that everyone else insists is fine. You can tell the difference between a genuine smile and one that is hiding a scream. You become a human lie detector for emotional dishonesty. This is both your gift and your curse. A gift because it allows for connections of breathtaking depth and authenticity. A curse because it means you are constantly absorbing the emotional static of the world around you. You feel responsible for moods you didn't create and for pains you cannot fix. You become an unofficial, unlicensed healer. And healers, if they are not careful, bleed out from the wounds of others. This bleeding out doesn't look like a dramatic collapse. It looks like a quiet fading. Your text messages become shorter. Your laughter becomes a softer, less frequent sound. You start to decline invitations, not with an excuse, but with a gentle, maybe next time. Your presence in the world becomes lighter, as if you are practicing how to disappear without causing a disturbance. And when someone finally notices the distance in your eyes and asks, "Are you okay?" you will offer the well-rehearsed, gentle smile and say, "I'm just tired." Because how could you possibly explain the symphony of sorrows playing in your head? You don't want to be a burden. You don't want to relive the pain by giving it words. So you fold it all inwards, adding another layer to the weight you carry.
But within this exhaustion lies a secret, a strength so quiet and unassuming that the world often mistakes it for weakness. This is not the strength of never falling. It is the strength of falling and falling and falling, and each time learning a new way to stand back up. It is the resilience of the scar tissue, tougher, more resilient, and more sensitive than the original skin. You have lived through emotional winters that would have permanently frozen others. You have walked through storms without shelter. You have rebuilt your sense of self from rubble more than once. This gives you an inner fortitude that isn't loud or boastful. It is the simple, profound ability to endure, to wake up and try again, to open your heart to the possibility of trust even when every synapse is screaming that it's safer to stay guarded. Because, against all odds, you still desire connection. You still crave a softness you have rarely known. You still dream of a life where you can finally lay down the armor, not because it's broken, but because you finally feel safe enough to be without it. This hope is what fuels the most transformative process of this entire journey, the alchemy of meaning-making. People who have gone through too much don't just experience pain, they autopsy it. They turn it over and over in their hands, searching for clues, for lessons, for a reason. You don't just live through heartbreak, you ask what it can teach you about your own capacity to love. You don't just survive chaos, you search for the clarity that was born within it. This relentless quest for meaning is what transmutes raw, debilitating pain into profound wisdom. It is a wisdom that makes you patient because you know that growth is not linear. It makes you empathetic because you understand that everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. It makes you forgiving, not from a place of weakness, but from a deep comprehension. You see that hurt people quite often hurt people. This perspective allows you to hold boundaries with one hand while offering compassion with the other. Yet there is a silent, invisible grief that accompanies this wisdom. It is not always the grief for a person you lost, but for the person you yourself used to be. The version of you who trusted with abandon. The version who believed in happy endings without reading the fine print. The version who felt light and carefree and who didn't have to mentally prepare for simple social interactions. You grieve for that innocent self, and you carry their memory with a gentle, somber respect. This grief doesn't debilitate you, it grounds you. It makes you more intentional, more present, and more deeply appreciative of the small, sacred moments of peace. A quiet morning with a cup of coffee, a genuine conversation that requires no masking, a moment of felt safety in another's presence. These are not small things to you. They are everything. They are the bricks with which you are slowly building a new world for yourself, a world where you can finally, truly feel safe in. And this is the final and most liberating realization. You are not defined by what happened to you. You are defined by what you chose to become after it happened. The scars are there, but they have become a part of your landscape, not your entire identity. The pain is a memory that has been metabolized into compassion. The struggle has become the source of your quiet, unshakable power. The more you understand this intricate psychology, the more you see the truth. You are not fragile, you are adaptive. You are not weak, you are incredibly discerning. Your mind is not a battlefield to be escaped, it is a testament. A living testament to your capacity to survive, to learn, to feel, and to grow in soil that was never meant to support life. You have the potential to become a lighthouse, not because you are always shining and perfect, but precisely because you know every contour of the darkness. You know how terrifying it is to be lost, to be shipwrecked by your own emotions. And in that knowing, you can become a guide. Your very presence can become a source of warmth and direction for others, not because you have all the answers, but because you have the map of the questions. You offer perspective without judgment and warmth without an agenda. You have learned, through sheer force of will, to live deeply, to love with intention, and to rebuild your inner world until it becomes a home you can finally, truly feel safe in. If you see yourself in these words, if you have lived through too much and felt too much, then hear this now. Everything you became was not an accident. It was not a flaw in your design. It was the brilliant, painful, and ultimately beautiful process of emotional evolution. You have been forged in fires you did not choose, and you have emerged not as scorched earth, but as tempered steel. You now possess the tools, the depth, and the quiet strength to create a future that is gentler than your past. You can break the cycles that once broke you. You can build new emotional habits where old traumas once ruled. You can choose softness without fear. You can choose love without losing yourself. You didn't just go through too much, you grew through it. And that growth, hard-won and paid for in tears, is now your quiet and unassailable power. The story is not over. It is just beginning to make sense.